and welcome to ESI Africa Studio. Today we have Saliem Fakir in studio with us. He is the Executive Director for the African Climate Foundation. Hello, Saliem.
Hello, how are you doing, Teresa? I haven't seen you for ages.
It's been forever. But I'm really glad that you have actually come into the studio now.
Thank you.
Because, there's something really important that we do need to speak about. And that is, what is it that African countries should be doing to prepare themselves for the carbon border adjustment mechanism?
I think countries that are mostly affected, like South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, etc., obviously are looking at this both within their own context, because it will have an effect. And I think what probably needs a lot more to be done is a more of a collaborative and coherent approach to it. But I'm still skeptical that CBAM, under the current geopolitical context, and given where there's now being pushback, even the French president yesterday was saying, we should relax the sustainability rules and so on, whether we might have more time or there might not be the level of implementation that it is. Remember, it's a form of a protection of local industry development in Europe, but there are implications also for Europe. There's internal issues. People are not happy with extra cost, which is Tony Blair the other day wrote about that. And then there are really serious input cost rises in Europe around the green industrial development, and they don't have all the critical minerals, and they're controlled.
Sitting in Africa.
So I think we must be prepared, but the better we coordinate and cooperate, the better. We just put out something now recently with the LSE University, Firoz Lahji Institute. We're coming out with an annual set of briefs on trade, and we're covering the UK CBAM, for example. So it's worth people having a look at that. Yeah.
And do you think anything's going to come out of the talks at the World Trade Organization, where people were asking, well, what is happening with this?
I think the World Trade Organization, most people have kind of accepted that it's literally collapsed, and it's even worse now because of pushback from the US. What I notice is happening is that there's a proliferation of what I call partnership agreements, like the Clean Trade Investment Partnership, which is linked to the European Partnership Agreement, which is a trade agreement. So they are effectively non-binding. They allow for cooperation, and they're quite specific. For example, in the CTIP, a big focus is on critical minerals, the petrochemicals industries, etc. So I find that very interesting. And
but like one country to one country.
In this case, it will be the European bloc versus South Africa.
Okay.
And for me, that's an interesting move as well. It's quite a strategic one. And we are still trying to understand a lot more detail of how that's going to work. But that's something to watch out for.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So another thing that we are always having to think about is the financing. So how can African governments actually define their own financing needs and the terms when it comes to applying for those really large tracts for infrastructure development?
That is one of the challenges. Like if you look at the African Union, it has this big PIDA thing, which is the Infrastructure Development Action Plan and so on. And we need about $90 billion per annum of investments. It's probably a little bit more. But post-COVID, we're dealing with serious debt issues. There's the G20 Africa Experts Panel that is looking at debt growth and development and is trying to answer these very questions that you mentioned. I do think that one way to do that is to look at how you can reprofile the debt currently to lower the cost. But then you need more debt to actually grow the economies, and you must be able to put that money to good use. And of course, choices like infrastructure, but being able to build the infrastructure with interconnections with other economic activity, like diversification of the economic sectors, that could make that work, and you can have growth paths that can sustain long-term infrastructure. The problem at the moment is that the vast majority of the people on the continent don't have the levels of income or persistence of income, like wages, formal wages, that allow for these long-term infrastructures to be paid for. So if you have low taxes, low economic growth, high debt, with a population not of a sizable income, a sustainable income, then you have real challenges of paying for that.
Okay.
But we need to look at these different models of financing it. We are, for example, trying to look at the use of remittances and diaspora funds.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Okay. So, is concessional funding, necessarily the best way for African countries to go?
I think it's not so much about concessional finance. It's what is the investment need, and can you source the capital domestically? It's very difficult for a lot of countries. And the second question is, how do you package this investment in such a way that you can get the cheapest source of funding? Will that all come from the public sector or private sector? That's not easy to answer. But investments have to have a return. So I'm not so much fussed about the question of debt. It's whether the rate of growth is higher than the interest component that you can sustain the investment. And as I said, if you can create more value out of the investment through other expanding economic activity, that's a good thing. So people have, they get stuck in the debate about debt. Everybody takes debt. The US is also $1 trillion of debt. So it's a question of the nature of the economy. For poorer countries, how they must use scarce capital in the most effective way. Are they investing in productive assets or consumption? Those are questions that need to be answered.
Thank you so much for joining us.
No, it's a pleasure. Really, real pleasure.
Always lovely having you here.
Yes, you too. Thanks.
And thank you for joining us. Please stay tuned for the next episode.